it's Aisha White, and I'm very excited. I'm here today with the founder and co-artistic director of Theater Buford. Her name is Julie Shepek. Hi, Julie.
Hello.
Thank you so much for having me today, sitting down to talk to me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited also. So we're here at the Alliance Theater. You said rehearsals are going to take place later on today.
Yeah, they will.
Okay.
Yeah. We're halfway through our rehearsal process, so this is our second week. We're closing in on our second week, and we rehearse in town, and then the last week we go down to Buford. We rehearse on the set, on the stage, and then we go into TAC. So we're halfway through. We're really excited. We've been doing some great work, and the Alliance has been so great to let us use their facilities and use their great big rehearsal rooms, so we feel very lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very spacious.
Yeah.
You can really get into the scene, I'm sure, and just, really sprawl out in this area.
Yeah, they've got mirrors behind these curtains.
Oh,
Isn't
nice.
that cool?
Yes,
Yeah.
and y'all like dancing and...
Yeah, like everything that we can desire is here, so it's very awesome.
That's really cool. So you're rehearsing, what show are you rehearsing for?
We are rehearsing A Christmas Carol, which is an adaptation by D.W. Jacobs. This version, we introduced Dickens as one of the main characters.
Oh.
And what we found as well is that we've been treating music as a central character as well in this story. And it's very movement based, and I'm very excited. It has a lot of heart. It has a lot of depth to it. And our cast has been so phenomenal in finding these sort of gems that are so universal to really bring this redemption story to life in ways that we've never really seen before or expected. There have been so many times where I've looked up, I'm like, I would have never imagined that, and that's exactly true, So it's been really fun, and I'm very excited for it this year.
That is really exciting, and I think you touched on something that I find really important is with plays, I know that there's a story, and if you're sticking to the script, people see the same story over and over again, and so the challenge is to kind of dig within that script and get to know these characters and just kind of form it into something that we haven't seen before. And so I think that's a really cool, it's a challenge, but also that creates like this great end product when you're able to apply these ways of thinking of it, ways of looking at characters that you had not before. So is it like these aha moments, these moments of discovery when you're seeing it maybe written a certain way or portrayed in a certain way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. For a long time I've just sort of viewed, Scrooge as a symbol for greed, and I've sort of fell into the trap of looking at these characters as sort of a one-dimensional archetype. They resemble something, but they're parables, so they often have multi-layers and multi-dimensions, and Scrooge has become this man with so many layers and this backstory that is so rich that we find ourselves finding compassion for him in lots of ways, and we find ourselves rooting for him in so many scenes where he's just being kind of awful sometimes, but we're like, we understand why you're doing this. Why won't someone slow down and listen, or why won't somebody slow down and just have that real conversation? So it's really exploring multi-dimensions, and something we also found is that the first definition of something that we sort of go to in our story, it's never that. It's always like the third or fourth meaning of this word, which is kind of cool to sort of expand into. And again, it's so rich, so full of heart, and they're just really giving these characters a life that is so rich and deep and human that I think that it stands alone. It shows you why this is a story that can be shown over and over again, because it just is so relatable.
Yeah.
And it's cool. It's really cool.
Yeah. I think it sounds like what you're saying is that you're really evoking emotions within the audience, and we're connecting with that character. And I think that it can reflect true life, like human life. We see people sometimes, and we are so quick to maybe oversimplify who this person is. This person's good, this person's bad, or whatever it is, and not looking at the nuance and the layers to people. And so I think it's kind of a teaching, moment to be like, well, there's more to people than that. Yeah. And so do you find that occurs not only in this play, but in other shows that you've produced, that you're able to just bring out that true human element and explore these different sides of these characters and connect with the audience through that.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
That's always the goal, you
Yeah.
know. I think so. I think it takes a lot for someone, especially in my position and where I'm at, to sort of not judge anyone, not judge the characters on the page, not try to put them in a box.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of skill. Who knows what you're colored by, and who knows, what the director story is and what influences them. And I think it takes a lot of patience to sort of find that. But that's absolutely the goal: is to let our guard down, let these people show us who they are, and bring out that truth, and invoke that emotion, so that our audience can identify and connect in some sort of way. Yeah, it's definitely the goal. You know, sometimes successful, sometimes not, but always the goal.
Is there any story that you may have been involved with that has spoken to you lately? Like maybe just you really connected with a character or with a story overall?
So I was just in New York not too long ago, and I went and saw Hadestown, and I went and saw Betrayal, which are two different pieces entirely, two different concepts of theater as well. But they had such great messages to it. I'll start with Betrayal. I really identified with that. It's this couple it's a story about a relationship where this there's an affair that's happening, and it shows it sort of reversed through time.
Okay.
And so you get to see the relationship at its highest peak, and then you get to see all the way to where they first met.
Okay.
And it was done in such a way that it made it so simple and so human that I didn't know what to feel afterwards. I was sad, I was upset, I was angry, and then I was also like, oh, this is how it happens sometimes. And the last moment is so beautiful. They're on this turntable, and they're all in the bathroom after their after their wedding party or something, and the husband brings in his best friend and his wife, and they're all hugging in just camaraderie, you know, right after the best friend has confessed his love to his wife, and they're on this turntable. And they just slowly turn and get pulled away from each other because of these lies and this deceit. And it's just kind of very, it's very simple. And that's how it happens sometimes. And so that connected with me in a way. I'm like, oh, God.
It definitely evoked emotion.
Yeah, it definitely did. It just shows us how complicated we can become sometimes, and how lost we can get in simple, just micro decisions sometimes. And what that means big picture. So it's just taking a very, human story, a very an action that happens pretty regularly, I feel like, and showing what that means in certain relationships to certain people, and how it can be destructive, or how it could be, I guess, helpful, or not to judge it in any kind of way. But then there was Hadestown, which is a musical, which was done so great. And it's about, it's an old tale, and it just shows from a point of a boy of what the world could be, and how we choose to, even if we know it's going to end horribly, we choose to try again. And that meant a lot to me. So those are two things that I sort of identify with in terms of, with each new play we come to, which each new cast we come to, it's a chance to try to connect again. Yeah. Try to tell a different story, try to reach out in some sort of way. And I think that's the best we can do. So don't plague it, come at it with bright eyes and give it a go. Yeah. Yeah. I like that very much. And they were two very different, but it just shows that they can affect you in different ways. So when it comes to different genres, I've heard before people express oh, well, comedy is much more difficult than drama to portray. Yeah. In your experience, do you find one to be more difficult? Is it just completely hard to compare the two? How does that break down? Yeah. I think it just comes from whatever your life journey is. For me, I find comedy a little bit easier in a sense that I can feel rhythms. I can feel structure a little bit more. For me, drama is a little bit harder in terms of just because sometimes I don't always have that depth.
Yeah.
You know, it's very surface level and trying to figure out what that is. But I think if you turn to structure and you turn to teaching and mechanics, comedy is definitely a lot harder. You've got to feel those beats. You know, what makes someone laugh changes all the time. It changes with the person, and how do you make humor universal and not offensive, and so finding whatever that balance is. And here's the thing with humor as well is that if we know it's funny, we try to make it funny, and what makes things funny is honesty, you know? So it's just, I think humor is more complicated in a structural way. But yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to compare. It depends who your team is, what you're working with, that kind of thing. I know if it was me in the role, like, man, I can do comedy all day. Yeah. I'm going to tank some drama, you know? I'm going to tank some drama big time. But, you know, understanding it, what those mechanics are, I feel like, yeah, comedy has a lot of structure to it, and a lot of things to think about. Yeah, I think, you know, when you put a team together, you've got to figure out what the right balance is. It's always sort of a formula in a way. Yeah. But I will say, if you always go for the honesty, if you go to the truth, if you go to the text, you know, and if you're searching for that sort of, you know, that sort of clean language between the two partners, and not mudding it up with all of our past history and what we bring to the table, I think that's a good start. And so wherever that takes you is a good place to go. So I try not to count one thing harder than the other, but, you know, every project has its tough spots, its challenges, and it's just how you strategize and who you look to work with, and how you build. And if you always start with sort of an honest approach, I think that's a good place to go from. You know?
Yeah, I think that's a really smart way of stating it.
Yeah. Because I mean, it can get so complicated so quickly. You know, like what makes someone laugh? You know, and that's such a big question. And I've always found that if I tell a joke or if I am trying to be funny, if I don't target it to whatever I think the person is, it always lands a little bit better. If it comes from, like, if I'm having fun in it, usually that joy sort of spreads. So, hopefully, anyway.
I think that can be really effective. I've seen it done that way, and We were talking about different genres, comedy and drama, and just the different approaches to it. I'm wondering, how do you get into the mind of a character that you're portraying? Do you have a process for that, or does it once again vary, you know, from genre to genre, whatever the story is that you're telling? Yeah,
I think it does definitely vary from genre to genre. You know, I started off as an actor, but I'm not so much as an actor by trade. I always start, you know, with reading the play first. I'm a very image-based person, and I try to sort of collect what these images are, and then unravel it that way. Why are these pictures coming to my mind? What does that mean for me? And discover it in sort of that way. Like, if I'm reading a scene, if I see my best friend, what sort of recall is from that sort of situation? Or if I see a color, what emotion is that evoking or affecting? So I always pull from images, and then I just try to break it down that way. And then again, it's sort of knowing the structure of the play, where it's going, what this person's ultimate goal is, what their want is, what their super objective is, figuring out what tactics you use to get there, and then responding to your partner in the scene, or watching your partners in these scenes. There was something while we're in rehearsal for Christmas Carol, we'll go back and forth sometimes where we're just trying to get the dialogue out. But then you'll see that their scene partner is responding some certain way. You know, either they're responding in fear or they're responding in surprise. And if that's not what your goal was, we've got to figure out what's happening there. So I think it's just always being present, watching what reaction you give or your partner is giving, and is that something that you're trying to evoke, or is that something that you want? Is that something that you can play off of? Like, can I make my partner scared so that they're weak later, and then I can slide right in for whatever I need? So it is a bunch of sort of micro decisions for this big super objective. But the older I get, the more I find that I'm way more connected to the universe than I've ever believed. So I start with pictures, and I start with feelings, and I start with these sort of big concepts, and then I break them down into small micro decisions and see where that takes me. And that always leads me to open up to newer things that I probably never expected, and leads me to places where my past history or my past experience doesn't cloud it or judge it or change it into how I feel. That's something I always try to watch out for, is if I have like a negative experience for something that I'm sort of seeing similarities to, not to try to plague it, and try to understand it. Because I think it's easy to do that, and especially for someone like me, I think it's easy to get wrapped up and lost in our emotion. And if there's something that I don't particularly like, how do I come at it with honest eyes? And versus like, oh, I know exactly what this is, and then attacking it from that way. So I think it always just comes back to this idea of, how do you give something a clean slate? And how do you give it that nurture and care and that responsibility, without judgment. And it's a hard thing to do, I think, as a human, just because we're always making decisions, we're always curating, we're always deciding what things are, we're always putting labels. So it's that slow sort of pace of just letting things be.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask. I was like, have you figured it out? Like, what's the secret to it?
I don't really know. I don't know. I'm just trying some stuff,
It's experimentation.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you could ever figure it out, because we're always evolving and we're always changing. And, whoever you have in the room, it brings a different chemistry. So, I don't think there's one formula. I don't think that there is one pathway to get to something. The only thing I know is that if you just come in with sort of, with your guard down and your heart open, you'll start somewhere that will lead to something beautiful. And if you can keep that, then that's always kind of great, It doesn't help. I mean, it doesn't help. It does help to be professional and to know your lines and to know all those technical aspects for sure all the time. And that really sets apart, I think, a production when you have technique to support things, to support the storyline. But you can't mask, an open heart and a real connection. You can't fake that. And I think that we can get really good at it, but there's some difference. And I don't know what that is, but, I've watched many of plays, and there's a difference. And that just starts with that just honest heart connection, that investment to these fake characters and making them real, to these, scenarios that are concocted, by somebody.
You're right.
So that's kind of what I think.
I think they're fake characters, but they're often inspired by real life, and so it only makes sense. I love that, coming into it with your guard down and with an open heart. That's like words to live by, just in general. Not being afraid to be vulnerable.
Exactly. I think it's just, it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do because, you can also find yourself in like a dog-eat-dog world, It's also an industry where you really have to work your hardest. It's tough. It is an industry where we're looking and we're making judgments and we're deciding if your clothes look right, and we're deciding if you're tall enough, if we're deciding this, and when those things also come into play, and they're valuable in some parts of production, to surpass all that and still come in with an open heart and fresh eyes and just that sort of breath of fresh air. it's hard. I think it's hard because we're human. We want things. We want people to like us and love us and be this, and we want to fill in every sort of aspect. And that necessarily isn't always the case. So, I mean, whatever that balance is and how to find it and how to go forward, with passion and love. And I feel like these are all general words, but it's very, very true. It's, if you just can dwindle it down to the basics, Yeah.
So it sounds like you've seen a lot, you've experienced a lot. It's all based upon your experience in the theater world. So I guess I should have asked at the beginning of this, but if you can give anyone that's watching just a little bit of background on your history with theater, like how you've come to the point where you are now. I know we started off attending theater classes together. I was a minor, you were a major, and I just remember you having a sharp sense of humor and like making the class laugh, and that always stuck with me. I was like, she has such a great sense of humor. But I remember your connection to the story. I think we were reading like Laramie Project, and that's a heavy one. And I remember you like reading lines and getting emotional about it. And I was just like, wow. So it kind of speaks to that like guard down, heart open kind of thing. And I was like, oh, this is a totally different experience, because in what other I started as a biology major and then like communication, and no other class were we exploring this heavy story and like being emotional, you know what I mean? Like we're like looking through microscopes and like that was a new experience for me. So anyway, that was what stuck in my mind thinking about you and like going back to when we first met. But if you can just give a background on your history and everything.
Yeah. So much like you, I started off in nursing. I played sports my entire life. I went to my first two schools. I played college softball, and so it was medicine and sports the entire time, which is fun and cool. And there was a shift somewhere along my life where I decided that isn't exactly what I wanted. In a sense, and so I was lost for a little bit, and I worked at a bar, and I had a fun time, and things got crazy, and then I went back to school, and I went to Clayton State, and that's where I met you, and that was my actually first dive into theater. I took a drama class once or twice in high school, but that was so whatever.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like that about all my high school classes. I was such a little chum. And I had all these teacher friends too, and I would like skip class to go hang out with other teachers. And I would skip school to go hang out with my friends at other schools. And you're like, what are you doing? So I went to Clayton State, and that's where we met, and that's where I met one of my mentors, Patricia Henritzy, and with Chantel Thrash as well. And I learned, the basics and the core of theater. And for me, I feel like I'm always trying to communicate. I'm always trying to, that's what we have, right?
Yeah.
That sets us apart, I think. And as storytellers, we get that privilege to communicate to a wide audience, and we don't get to decide what they feel, and we don't get to decide how they respond, but we do get an opportunity to connect with multiple people at the same time. And what we choose to do with that is something that's always been very important to me. And my family, we're all first generation Polish, and I had a very interesting upbringing that is so remarkable. And I value so much. As I get older, the value just increases, and I'm like, why did I not know this when I was 12? It's such a douche. I don't know. Ugh, terrible. But so in those formative years, I just knew I wanted to communicate. I knew I wanted to be a storyteller, no matter what that meant.
Right.
And so I hit the ground running. When I took those classes, I always pushed for something more. I pushed to be this, I pushed to be that, I pushed to get into this role. And I think at one time I was campaigning to be the company manager, and I took an internship, which led to another internship, led to me being an assistant stage manager, then led to me being a stage manager. So these things just sort of evolved to each other, and I got to watch the mechanics and how this worked, and I got to learn about every single department, which was something kind of nice. And I also, got to figure out what drove me and what I excelled at, you know, and which pulled me away a little bit from acting into, you know, directing, just because I had a stronger sense in that sort of way. I was a bigger picture kind of person, you know. Even in my own life choices, I don't have a secular view. I make my choices versus on, you know, what this aspect is or who this person is in my life. So it always has multi-dimensions into it, and I think that's a really great strength for a director, to look at different viewpoints and find different objectives with different people and live in those different sort of dimensions, instead of having just a one straight shot viewpoint. Because that's never how I've sort of, my thinking works. You know, I always consider this or that, or this person or that, you know, strategy, and to go forward. And that's kind of how I ended up here. And I was really blessed to work on a show called Hot Pink, Ready to Blow, with the Weird Sisters, and I was their stage manager for that. Then come a few years later, they were ready to turn over the reins to a new group of producing women, and I was one of those women. And that led me to 4 really wonderful friends that have such great strength and skill, that have taught me so many things and taught me to be a better person and to be a better collaborator in so many ways. And then that led me to, you know, other jobs, where I started working at the Tavern for a show where I met Justin, and now me and Justin are partners, and we had created this Theater Buford. So it's all these connections, all these relationships that lead you from one place to the other. And you know, for me, it was just always sort of trying to keep that path open, that line open, and see where it takes you. And also trying not to say no, you know, trying to invite things into your life and figuring out, you know, what works and what doesn't, but always saying no when you need to, you know. Boundaries. Yeah, having those boundaries for sure. Professor H, or Patricia Henry, actually wrote me a book of no, and she's like, you say yes to everything, and I'm like, I know, and so it was really like 20 pages of just the word no, and I was like, okay, I get it, I'll say no. But yeah, that's sort of how I got here, is just trying to, you know, take the opportunity and give myself the freedom to be in that opportunity, if it worked out or if it didn't, you know, because the worst thing is a project lasts 3 or 4 months or so, you know, and I was so lucky. It brought me to other people in New York, where I went on a tour for a while, and that just these really wonderful culture people that brought me into, you know, to modern dance and to public art, and how to demonstrate your voice in those sort of aspects. And for me, that's all kind of curated my voice and what that means. Like, I don't feel like I'm a very secular person. I feel like when I try to come at art, I'm always trying to mash up these different styles and find how they work within each other, versus like, this is just purely presentational, this is just realism. I'm always trying to pull from different sort of categories and blend them and make them work somehow. And sometimes it works really well for me, and it has, you know, this beautiful storytelling to it. But yeah, that's kind of how I got here, is trying to be open, you know? Yeah.
I think it makes life more interesting that way, when you're open to all these different viewpoints, and just when it comes to creative endeavors, being able to try different things and put it together, and like we were talking about, this experimentation kind of aspect of it, I think it makes things more interesting, and, you know, you enjoy what you do more. So that's, you know, my point of view at least. But yeah,
exactly. You gotta enjoy what you do, you know, even if it's hard, you got to, or else why are we doing it,
exactly.
You know? Why? We could stick to biology and stick to nursing, you know, and that's a pretty nice, easy life, you know? Yeah.
I had no clue you started with sports and medicine. I had no idea.
Yeah, it was such a flip. Such a flip, you know, and I'm like, what? How did this even work out? Like, it's such a flip.
I think it just takes some time sometimes to identify what it is that, like, is the sweet spot for you. It's like, sometimes you have to be in the midst of something and realize, like, oh, okay, this is fine, but not really what I'm passionate about. This is not what's driving me and making me like, okay, if it's not what you're thinking about on, top of brain when you wake up in the morning, like maybe it could be something else. So sometimes it takes, being in the midst of it and being like, okay, let me try something different to recognize what it is that you have a real interest in or what drives you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Why don't you tell everybody about your upcoming shows that you all have that Theater Buford has going on?
Okay, so we open Christmas Carol on December 6th.
Okay.
Then we'll go straight into The Importance of Being Earnest, which is a fun show that we did in college.
Yeah.
And I played Gwendolyn in that, and I'll be playing Gwendolyn again in this one, which will be very exciting and very scary. And then we close our season with Grease, our big musical, which will be fun. It'll be directed by Tom Jones and music directed by Renee Clark, who's music directing Christmas Carol with us, and she is the finest musician in this town.
Awesome.
I mean, she pulls out just guttural emotion and heart. So I'm very excited to see what our twist on Grease is. We've definitely put some thought into it and curated sort of a style for it as well, to try to make it less Disney and more authentic in a way. So that's going to be our season, and we're working really hard on our next couple of shows for next season. But yeah, that's where we're at right now.
Great.
Yeah.
They call out this beautiful setup that you have here. I think it's appropriate for wintertime and Christmas Carol that's coming up.
Anybody who watches this interview will always know it happened in the holidays.
Yes, definitely.
So there's no doubt about that. It is not summer. It is not summer.
It's not middle of June. No.
Yeah.
Well, Julie, thank you so much for sitting down and talking to me about what you do. I think it's super interesting. I feel like I could ask you more and more questions and be here for hours, but I know that it's not possible. So
thanks so much. This means so much to me, and thanks for taking your time and thinking of me. It means a lot. And
of course.
Knowing that we went to school together and hearing your kind of memories, just, I know, sparks so much joy and thought. And so thank you so much. This means I feel very lucky. So thank you.
Thank you so much. When I interview someone, I always accompany the video with a blog. So for anyone watching, when I turn around this video, once it's edited up, when you're viewing it, in the description area, you can look for the link to my blog where I'll be talking about Julie and her background with theater and just important details about her. And I'll include things like the website for Theater Buford and where you can find more information about the upcoming shows, because I definitely want people to get out and see them, and it's a perfect time for a Christmas Carol. So yeah. I'm really excited about it.
Awesome, thank you. And come see our shows. It's gonna be fun. I'll be there.
Yes, definitely. To all my viewers, my OG subscribers and my new subscribers, hello to you all. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, give it a like, and of course subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this, where I'm doing my solo videos talking about communication, or where I'm talking to talented, beautiful, smart people like Julie about communication in broader forms, whether it's creatively on stage or through body language or any of these type of things. So thanks for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.